Up next, a visit to the Starship Enterprise. Well, hey guys, and welcome back to another Initiative Modeler. In this video, what I'd like to do is take a break from model building and share with you a unique experience I had last weekend, and that was a visit to, make sure I get this right now, the Star Trek Original Series set tour in Ticonderoga. It's an attraction that's been there for about 8 years, and in that time, it's gained quite a name for itself, and it's become a pilgrimage for Star Trek fans from all over the world. I've seen a number of posts throughout the years. I have a couple of friends who visited there, so I decided to finally take that pilgrimage this year, and I'm glad I did. I had a fantastic time, and I plan on doing it again. Now, the attraction is the brainchild of this gentleman here who I'm pictured with. His name is James Cawley, and he made a series of fan films called Star Trek New Voyages in around the mid-2000s, I believe. They were notable because of the incredible amount of effort he put forth to recreate the look, sound, feel of the original series. The sets were meticulously recreated, and you could tell by watching those fan films he is a true Star Trek fan for sure. Not only by those fantastic sets, but the uniforms, writing, pacing, music. It really gave you a very similar vibe to the 1960s TV show. Now, this museum houses those sets along with others that he's added on since, and it is the closest thing that you'll ever feel to being on the original, as Scotty would say, no bloody A, B, C, or D Enterprise. So what I have for you here now is a slideshow, It doesn't contain any video of the experience itself, and that's because there are some limitations to what you can take there. You can't take any video, but you can take as many pictures as you want, and this is due to a licensing agreement that Mr. Cawley has with Paramount. So it is a Paramount sanctioned attraction. So what I'm going to do is I'll narrate through the slideshow and hopefully convey my experiences with you there, and this will all be followed by comments afterwards. Now, you'll notice in a number of pictures there's a gentleman pictured with me there, and his name is David Lee. He's a friend of mine who decided to take this trip out with me. He's been aspiring to get there for some time as well, and we both flew into Albany, New York. That was a destination that was recommended by the Glorious Treksperts. This is a podcast I listened to, and they were there about a few months ago, and there is an alternate location, which is Burlington, Vermont, which is what James Cawley had recommended flying into or had mentioned, and but from Southern California there are limited options to get to Burlington. The price is more expensive. To get to Albany is not as hard, but Albany does take a little bit longer to drive from. It takes about 2 hours to get to Ticonderoga, while Vermont, or Burlington, Vermont, is only 90 minutes, and that is only 52 miles from there, 115 miles from Albany. Either way, I'm sure the drive from Vermont is just as beautiful, because the drive from Albany was just gorgeous, especially if you come from Southern California. We don't have any sort of foliage like that you see. It's pretty brown and dry here, and so it's always a treat to fly to other parts of the country where there's that amount of trees. So it is beautiful, and you won't be disappointed with that drive. All right, let's go ahead and get started with the slideshow, and then I'll wrap it up with some comments afterwards. So our tour was at 10 a.m. and we got there just a little bit before. Here's a shot of the sign that you'll see shortly after turning onto Montcalm. And this is the front of the building that you see as you turn into the parking lot. So as you walk towards the main entrance, you'll see there are a few kiosks there that provide descriptions of the 3 divisions in Starfleet: Engineering, Science, and Command, and they also play short clips from the original series. Going through the main door, Kirk and Spock are there to greet you, and turning to your left, you come into the main lobby, which has this huge model of the Enterprise, along with quite a few collectibles on display that James Cawley has acquired over the years. And there's a gift shop. So they gave us a few minutes before the tour to change, as David and I brought uniforms to wear for the tour. The tour began promptly at 10 and kicks off with a brief description of the tour, a summary of some rules, and a demonstration of how the doors were made to slide open on the TV series. Once you enter, the first thing you walk into is a corridor, and you feel immediately transported to the 23rd century. We've all seen these episodes so many times that you're instantly familiar with your surroundings, and it's just a little surreal. The corridor, with its 23rd century styling along with the beautiful colors and cast shadows, really make you feel like you are on the TV show. It's just incredible, and that feeling continues throughout your tour. first stop was the briefing room. At first, I just found myself pausing for a moment just to take it all in. I began thinking of just how many famous scenes we saw take place in the briefing room. There are those curved wall and ceiling supports, that angular table with a 3D chess set on it, there's Spock's computer station, the view screen on the other side of the room, along with the Federation flags, and you can't help but notice the vibrant blues and reds, which are just striking. Being this was a photo tour, we were allowed to sit at the briefing table, take a few poses as we fiddled around with the chess set, and I have to say, it just added to the experience. Next up, the transporter room, and it looked just like the one we're familiar with, down to the Fresnel lenses that you stand on. The control console is perfectly detailed with the warning lights blinking along the top. And how many times have you wished to stand on those transporter pads looking out at the transporter station and waiting to say, "Energize"? And since I was wearing the tunic Captain Kirk wore in The Enemy Within, I couldn't help but take advantage of the lighting and have this shot taken. It's amazing how it makes your darker side come through. A few other details to note. I'm sure you noticed the replica of the chest used to transport a Medusa in the episode Is There in Truth No Beauty? I also noticed the starfield on the wall to the right of the control console that was often featured in the first season. And also present was this monitoring station that stands to the left of the control console and was featured in a number of episodes. Also present was a replica of the control console from the cage, which I understand was constructed for Anson Mount's visit to the tour. Next, a visit to sickbay, and again, you just can't help but notice the attention to detail. First was a look at the examining table, complete with a vial containing a sample of Vulcan blood, just as we saw in the episode Journey to Babel. The table can even shift from a reclining to a standing position. This screen display looked just like the one on the show, providing a readout of the patient's vital signs. Looking around the room, you see the cabinet from which McCoy handed the dark side Kirk the Saurian brandy, and do you wonder what those white cones are? They're trombone mufflers. As you step into the next room, you will see the medical beds, and again you are reminded of the many scenes that took place in this room from the cage to the final episode of the series. And talking about details, just check out the old-fashioned instruments on the wall. You can almost hear McCoy saying, "It would be most effective if you cut the carotid artery just under the left ear." And here's McCoy's office, complete with all the artifacts he had on display. The room right next to the examining table is the lab, yet another very recognizable set. Here you see the various control panels along the far wall, and the table in the foreground with the lit tower. On the opposite end of the table is a captive parasite from Deneva, and understandably David's first instinct was to draw his phaser. On the wall opposite the lab desk is the decompression chamber, which doesn't open and close by the way, but there is a poor crewman inside undergoing treatment with his uniform and boots on too. Must have been an emergency. Next on the tour, we got to visit Kirk's quarters, and it looked perfect down to the last detail. And speaking of details, can you remember the combination to Kirk's safe? We also were shown the Tantalus device. And yes, that polygon panel does slide up and down too. We were even allowed to press the activation button. No wonder it was less crowded when we left the room. As we left Kirk's quarters though, the phaser on overload went off, but luckily we were able to dispose of it on time. As we made our way to the next set, we walked along the corridor and stopped to get a look at this access port, and I was immediately reminded of the scene in The Alternative Factor where Lazarus tampers with it to gain access to the dilithium crystals. And then we briefly paused at the famous Jeffries tube, which you can't climb. Although it was really tempting. One of the newer additions is this room here, the auxiliary control room, which is just a beautiful recreation. So many scenes took place in this room too, and sitting in that chair prompted me to flex my thespian skills, although I'm nowhere near William Wyndham's talent. Now my favorite room was of course the bridge,
But this is my second favorite, the engineering section. And I mean, wow, look at all of the exquisite detail, and how many times did you want to stand next to that famous impulse engine unit with that forced perspective behind you? The guide encouraged us to do Scotty's holding on to dear life pose. And here's a shot next to the dilithium crystal pack. And looking off to the right as you enter, there are these huge modules that appeared only in the first season, I believe. And here I am looking for my dark side. Luckily, I had a little help. And the last stop on our visit to this famous ship, the bridge of the USS Enterprise. Walking onto this set is really something. I have always been amazed at its design, and it just never gets old to me. I recommend taking a minute just to stop and look at the view as you walk in. Of course, you're inclined to head right to the captain's chair, which we were invited to sit in. This might not be the original chair, but it's as close as you're going to get, especially since William Shatner himself has sat in this chair each of the 11 times he's been here. The view from this vantage point is just as you would expect it to be. You really feel like you're in command of all of this and everything that comes with it. Just amazing. And before leaving, don't forget to take the last few minutes you have there to visit all of the stations on the bridge. And don't forget to glance back for one last look as you leave.
So, as you exit the bridge, you find yourself back in the 21st century again, and you are in the location where James Cawley has a lot of his collectibles on display. Let's take a look at a few of those. So these cases include some original props, but many of them are reproductions, and you can see also, along with props, he's got costumes on display there too. Now, some of these are screen used, but a number of them are also reproductions. And he's got quite a variety of things there to look at. You can just keep looking at this case over and over again, and every time you see something that you didn't pick up before. This case here has a collection of old toys and memorabilia. And when you look at this stuff, at least for me anyway, it makes me recall my childhood for sure. And if you are as old as I am, I'm sure the same thing will happen to you. Check out the vintage Halloween costumes along with the old AMT kits. I remember having that walkie-talkie communicator, and there's a bunch more things in there too. And to the left of that cabinet is this here, which is a reproduction of the Arch from the holodeck. And inside there, he's got some Next Generation uniforms there too. And while we were looking around, we were fortunate to run into James Cawley himself, and he really was a true pleasure to meet and talk with. We actually had an extended conversation with him, and he relayed some great stories about his time working on the Next Generation in the costume department, and gave us some details about how this whole Star Trek tour came to be. And a few other pictures to share with you here. This is James Cawley's beautiful Batmobile, which is an incredible reproduction of the car seen in the 1960s TV show. He had brought it out to the tour, and it was parked out in front when we returned from lunch. It is absolutely amazing. So once we were done looking at everything in the collectibles section and bought a few things in the gift shop, we decided to go to lunch across the street at a diner. And while we were at lunch, we decided to take a second tour. So we just turned right back around and decided to take a standard tour this time around. And I actually brought two tunics with me because I was just kind of undecided which one I was going to wear. And I'm glad I did, because I just wore the other one for this tour. And here are just a few shots. I won't do a whole slideshow on this one, but you can see I decided to wear a Commodore tunic instead. And I'm so glad that we did take this second tour, because it really gave us the opportunity to slow down a little bit, take a second look around, and be able to see a few more things in detail that we kind of rushed through the first time around. So I'd recommend a second tour if you get the chance. I'm not sure they always have that availability. They just happen to that day. And but if you have to travel a long way like we did, it's worth taking the time and taking advantage of the opportunity. Okay guys, well, getting ready to wrap it up here. I thought I would close the video out here wearing my green wrap tunic that was designed by Dennis Chu. If you're interested, find him on Facebook. He does make other tunics as well. In fact, his most recent one is the Next Generation tunic, the one from third season on. So check it out. They're beautifully done, getting a lot of reviews for that. The other thing I want to mention is we did get a chance to visit Fort Ticonderoga, which was just 2 miles away from the attraction. Didn't get a chance really to hang out in Ticonderoga a whole lot because it was such a short stay, but it looked to be a beautiful town. Hopefully I'll be able to explore a little bit more of the area when I get out there again. But again, the fort was just 2 miles down the road, and we had about 2.5 hours to explore it. I'm glad we did because it is a beautiful site, so I'd recommend taking a look at that as well. As for when I'll get out there again, I'm hoping maybe next year, actually. As I understand it, and we were talking to Mr. Colley, as I mentioned, I did ask about the Galileo 7 because I've known for some time that there were plans to have it on display there. So it turns out that, the Galileo was restored, as many of you know, and it was on display at the Houston Space Center for some time, but then it was put into storage and then eventually loaned to a museum, an aircraft carrier museum out in New York City, in which it was exposed to the elements for some time, which I thought was really bizarre considering how much effort they went through to restore it. But it did get moved back to Houston, and apparently it was put back in the storage, but Mr. Colley did get a hold of it, so this is going to be now the permanent home, which I'm really happy to hear because I know it's going to be well taken care of at the Ticonderoga Museum for sure. So I've always wanted to see the Galileo. I was actually planning a trip out to Houston Space Center when it was out there, but just didn't get around to it. But I definitely want to see it, so that's one reason among others to get back to the Ticonderoga attraction for sure. All right, guys, if you have any other questions, feel free to contact me here on my YouTube channel or at innershuttermother@gmail.com. I hope you enjoyed following along and found this of interest. Again, highly would recommend this attraction if you get a chance to get out to it. I think you won't be disappointed. It really was a lot of fun, and definitely look forward to making it out there again myself. Take care, guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Coming up on the channel will be my Halloween build. I am currently working on that, and I should have that on the channel in the next couple weeks. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.